And I always feel like that someone who is like selling takes online or whatever, which I think is pretty gay to start with, but like if you're doing that and you're not putting your face and your name to it, it's just so cowardly. Just be upfront with what you think. And if what you think is so like abhorrent, maybe you should just think something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything
like,
I
just
think
don't think that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to be a libtard or whatever, or a fed or a psyop or whatever these fucking buzzwords that these schizos have. But yeah, you're not that important, honey. So you don't need to hide your face. None of us are, by the way. I'm not saying that like any of us are like super important or whatever, but like,
speak for yourself.
At least we have
Agitator.
our very handsome, symmetrical faces out there. So, you know.
Hey, thanks. I've been feeling down about myself. I appreciate hearing that.
You know, he's really he's shameless in intellectual argument. He's absolutely without character, a moral foundation, or even intellectual substance.
Welcome back to Getting Lit. Last episode, we talked about Hotel Hell and Stephen King's 1408. And this episode is the second part of our Gene Wolfe series with Kelby Losack and J. David Osborne from Agitator podcast. Welcome, boys.
What's up? What's up? Happy
Hello.
to be here.
All right, we ready to get into Gene Wolfe? The Claw of the Conciliator, which is the second volume in the Book of the New Sun. If you haven't listened to the first episode, go and listen to that maybe, or just listen to this, whatever. Like, I'm not the boss of you, so you can do whatever you want. But, so what we're looking at here is the whole Book of the New Sun, and we've previously looked at Shadow of the Torturer, which is the first volume, and Claw of the Conciliator is the second volume. And what did we think of this? Because David's read it before, but we haven't, have we, Kelby? We're doing this.
No, yeah, this was the first time. First time for all of it. So for me, yeah, Claw of the Conciliator, I felt, even though the first one goes all over the place, I mean, we talked about how there could be so much happen in one fucking paragraph, and then it's just hundreds of pages of this crazy shit happening and all these tangents and side quests. But the second one felt more pulpy in a way. I don't know if it's like how it kicks off pretty close to the beginning. You get like ape men and shit. So I was thinking like, you know, those the Edgar Rice Burroughs and like shit like that, but it just felt a lot pulpier, and but with that same like hypnotic alien language that Gene Wolfe writes in, that's just like so eloquent. I feel like it was more violent, though I'm not sure that's accurate, because Shadow of the Torturer was not tame by any means. But I don't know, it was just something about it felt more, and it felt tighter. It felt more like David was saying before the show, this one feels more novelistic, for sure.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something that I want to talk about later. But yeah, what are your second impressions, David? Because you've read it before, but...
This one to me feels much longer than the first book. And I think it has a lot to do with the amount of postmodern digressions in Claw versus Shadow, with the plays and the stories. And Wolfe is really going deep into telling different stories. There's probably my least favorite section is in Claw, which is the play, because it's just lore, you know? But when I think about it, I think of Shadow as this kind of dark, pulpy cartoon. And then Claw, actually, like when I think of it, it feels more like an expanse of sand, probably because towards the end they're in the pampas grass and they're kind of out in the open. So that's not a it's not a total just like summation of the book. But in terms of reading it, I think Kelby's right. This is a darker book than Shadow. It gets more fucked up. Between the appearance of the Cacogens and the dinner, the midsummer dinner with Thekla's corpse, and and this is a minor scene, but it's one of the more disturbing ones in the whole Book of the New Sun, where he's talking about, his cowardly mentor who couldn't, get it up to perform the duties of the torturer, and how he had this iron dildo to kind of, because rape is forbidden among the torturers unless it's a part of the sentence. Yeah. And so he has this flashback to where his mentor is drunk and is saying like, I can still get it up. I don't even care, but I'm going to use this. And he doubles down on the, like, if you think about it too much, it gets more and more fucked up, right? Like him and Jolenta in the boat, like, did he rape her, or was that more of like a you know what I mean? Like there's all this kind of stuff where you could be like, how dark do you want to imagine this? And in terms of just like my reading over I don't know of any author who's better at doing that, right? So much in this is implied, and it still feels like one of the most evil books I've ever read. You know what I mean? Just like, it's just dripping with like despair and people giving up, and between Jolenta with her either bat bite or suicide attempt, and oh my god, why is his friend's name escaping me? The cyborg. Jonas, right. I was going to say Jasper for some reason. Jonas just like completely giving up in the antechamber, right? Like that was like, books that are about depression and giving up are less affecting than the 40 or so pages of watching Jonas like say, if I'm going to stay here for like, I'm done, just like actually giving up on life. So Claw, it's a fucked up book, man. This is a really fucked up book, but it's not in your face about it. So I think it slips under the radar.
Probably because like what both of you identified was the like more pulpy plot-based elements of it were really kind of front and center here. So that perhaps lulls you into a false sense of security in a way, because but at the same time, like it's kind of simultaneously like more formulaic and more enigmatic than the previous one. So Shadow of the Torturer is very sort of like floaty, lots of things are happening that you're not quite sure of the exact, physics or logic of it, but it is a little bit kind of misty, right? But this one is more like, pulpy is the good word. It's like, and then this happened, and then that happened, et cetera, et cetera. And there's also like a lot more kind of formulaic devices that I found really interesting in this one, that like, and it's all like the plot stuff. Like there's some mystery that's about to be revealed, and then there's an attack or an ambush, or some character waltzes in to save the day or whatever. And so, the other thing that's really pulpy about it is the really very clearly kind of signposted traps and setups, like the letter from Thekla, I'm still alive. And
he's like, wait, like, she wouldn't say that.
Yeah, it's like, dude, come on. You're really gonna.
In retrospect, I had no idea how I fell for that, and I'm like, yeah, dog, me neither, because that shit
I don't know how you fell for that shit either, bro. I love how he keeps. It's almost like, because at the end of Shadow of the Torturer, he's like, no shade. If you don't want to keep going with me on this journey, it just gets more difficult from here. But it almost gets easier because, one, you're used to it, what you're getting into. But two, he kind of keeps explaining himself in a way, in like a Book of the New Sun type of way, not in a way that's like spelling out for you everything that's happening, but just in like just when you start to lose your bearings, he goes, what I felt was kind of weird about that was, and then you're like, yeah, I thought that was kind of weird too. Okay, we're on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, and then like the other thing about that as well, the way he, the narration of Severian, he'll, I like that you mentioned the postmodern stuff before, David, like that it'll be like pulpy, but then there'll be these like flourishes, like he'll be in the middle of a fight scene or something like that. And then like, this reminded me of my time back at the Citadel, and we'll go on like a digression about like, his apprenticeship or whatever. And, that kind of slows down the plot, but like, it's almost like he's purposely doing that while being very, very plot heavy in this one, which I found like a really interesting device. And yeah, as you said, the play and the other texts like kind of disrupt this. I think it's a much more cogent book in terms of its story than the first one, but then he just throws in these random digressions and like, other texts and things like that clearly show you that like he's doing something else here. This is not like a Edgar Rice Burroughs sort of like adventure tale, or not just that anyway. So that's what really appealed to me. But yeah, it was much darker than the first one, definitely.
It's also on the postmodern tip. For example, when they get caught by the Praetorians and put into the antechamber, for listeners, Severian's going to the House Absolute. He's on a mission to deliver a message to a brothel owner who might be the autarch type situation. When they get caught and they get put in prison, two things. First of all, Wolfe is a master of slowly building dread, right? Because the reveal of the antechamber is just that generations of people have been there, right? But the way it's presented is so scary as you're kind of going through and things are being revealed to you. The second thing is that I think Wolfe demonstrates from a writing craft perspective how to give the reader the sensation of a lot of time passing, right? Because they're in this antechamber. It's a low ceilinged. I actually, my interpretation of it was that the House Absolute's an old office building, right? Because when they talk about the low ceiling with the tiles that push up, I was like, oh, so they're in like this was like an office essentially, right? And then the alcoves I pictured as like cubicles, like they were put into different like cubicles. But the way that he passes time is by having Severian take out the book that was given to him by Thecla, and they read the story about and I, even though I don't love the play, I love this story because it's such a funny continuation. Like it's just false start after false start. Like you keep thinking you're getting into the story, and then it's like, and then the student, he had what does he call him? The man flesh from dreams, right? Like the young man flesh from dreams. So a guy, he dreams a guy into existence who then goes and fights an ogre. It's a brilliant, beautiful, long story from this book. And that time you spend away from the characters, I think when you come back to Severian and Jonas, like you feel like time has passed. Mm-hmm. And it's so smart to do that. Like if you want to communicate how much time is going on, like find a way for the characters to become distracted by something and literally take the reader on a 15 or 20 minute digression so that when you come back, you're like, man, they've been there for fucking ever. Mm. And he never has to say it. Like, I think they're there for a day or maybe 2 days, but you feel it. You feel it because of that kind of postmodern story within a story type thing, right?
Yeah, and it never feels like, sometimes when you read a digression in a novel and it's just like, is this cunt just like padding out the word count, like because like it's actually a novella and they've got to publish a novel, so they're just doing this random thing to like boost the page number. But no, like you said, it feels very purposeful. Like it's there for a reason. It's not just like some fix up from some old short story that he published in astounding stories or something like that he just threw in there. It's like a story that lends itself to what is going on in the other story that is nested within. So yeah,
it's like when that story ends. Oh, sorry, Kelby, go ahead. Yeah,
it's like the anti-montage. It's like, no, we're not going to speed through this. You're going to feel it along with us.
I think also one of my favorite bits in the whole Book of the New Sun is the end of the story, right? So, Severian's reading to Jonas, and it's this story about a guy, like he's trying to become like a master magician type dude. He's trying to get inducted into this order or whatever. And sorry, my son was screaming. And he doesn't want to be a master in the order. He wants to remain kind of an apprentice for as long as he can. But he creates his son, who is a person who came out of his dreams, right? And then the son is sent on a quest through this convoluted, twisted thing to go kill an ogre who lives in the ocean and has a castle for a body and an airship for a head or some shit like that. But anyway, it's kind of, if anybody remembers Game of Thrones, how does that happen in Game of Thrones? I'm going to scratch that from the record. Anyway, there's a miscommunication, and the son, fleshed from dreams, does kill the ogre with the help of this smoke monster, like the Fern Gully Tim Curry character, right? Comes back. The dad still thinks that he is dead because of all the smoke, and kills himself. And it has one of my favorite lines at the end where it says, like, because there's like no reason to go on after your dream has died. And I was like, oh, banger, fuck. Like Uncle Gene did it again. But he always does that shit, like you're with him for 20 pages. You're like, God, this is so interesting and so weird. And then he just hits you at the end with that like punchline. You're like, fuck, this is the best book I've ever read.
Yeah. It like lances you. It's just you're just like, oh, going along. This is fun. Like in the heart. Yeah. So
the kind of one of the examples of how he's so able to imply a lot with it still feeling like viscerally dark and gory and fucked up, even though some of it is either told or shown, but like sort of in a fast, offhanded way, or just explicitly like just implied, like just like kind of, is that one, you're like always kind of confused just because he's using words that don't exist or that are so archaic that they might as well not exist. And so you're just like, okay, I'm just kind of tripping and I'm just making shit up in my head as I go along with, how I interpret all of this. But then he like, I wouldn't describe Severian as disaffected. He just, because he expresses different things he cares about or whatever, and then he flat out just says, I don't care. Like he'll say, I wasn't sympathetic towards her feelings whatsoever. It was just that something about her made me feel some kind of, it's like he expresses what he's feeling. So you kind of trust him, and he just keeps him mellow, like, and it's that like odd coldness. It's not psychopathic really. It's just like, I don't know. It's a fascinating, different type of coldness where I think he gets away with it because it's this like far future, it's a culture we don't understand because it's just, this fantasy world. But you're just like, God damn, bro. Like,
but it's also, isn't it also a coldness that comes from age, that he's looking back on like how he was, and he's sort of like, you ever like, you ever do that when you like look at something like stupid you did when you were young or something like that, and you can actually at some point like look at it a little bit more objectively, without cringing. Sometimes you can do that, not always, but you know what I mean. Like if you're trying to like write something out or whatever, or just like even just remembering something, like it's very realistic, to use that term as well. Like looking back as an older man on the exploits of a younger man and being a little bit more distant or cold, or at least not thinking that it's as all important as you may have thought it was when you were that age, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And especially if you're like, and if you've reconciled with it in one way or another, if you've just been like, fuck it, it's how I got to here, so whatever I did is what I did. Or if you're just like, I've done, it's in the past, it is what it is. But if you've reconciled with all of that or compartmentalized it or whatever, then yeah, you're just going to be like, yeah, so I cut this bitch's head off, and then I did what I did. Money had to be made. He says that at one point too. He like, after this dramatic staging of the beheading on the really like, how would you put it? He's like sort of annoyed by how this whole ritualistic torture is going, because these like sort of country bumpkins are forgetting the steps,
forgetting their lines,
the theatrics. They're forgetting their lines, and he's like, I knew that they had no regard or memory that I was not to be taking the steps, but even so, I made sure that I like leapt up on stage with my bat cape floating behind me.
Yeah, you know what that reminded me of? That reminded me of like someone, who used to be in theater or something like that. It was on Broadway and now is like teaching at a community center or something like that. They're like, these fucking rubes. Like,
if you look at the Morwenna scene too, the Morwenna scene's a great example of how good Wolfe is at subtlety, because Severian essentially is talking about his execution of Morwenna as a capsule of what he does on the road, right? So he comes to this town. This woman's been accused of poisoning her husband and child. And if you just read it, here's how the sequence goes. Morwenna is taken up there. There is a woman whose name escapes me who loved Morwenna's husband, who's there to watch her execution. So Morwenna, she gets branded, she gets her legs broken, and then she gets beheaded, right? And after she's dead, the woman says, essentially like, I made everything up. I don't know, like she might have done it, she might not have done it, whatever. And then she's holding this bouquet of flowers. The chapter itself is called The Bouquet, and she like smells them and then she dies. Right. So what Wolfe is doing there is so interesting, because if you were to just read that, you'd be like, damn, this falsely accused woman just, got killed for like no reason. But the fact that the woman who accused her smells a bouquet and there's a poison in the bouquet that kills her means that Morwenna is such a good poisoner that she was able to get something into those flowers somewhere between the prison and the executioner's block, right? So what Wolfe is saying is like, oh no, she did that shit. Like she did all that, but it's so complex, right? Like the woman who's there doesn't know that she actually did it. You have to go through, like the second read is so cool because you start to notice things like that. You're like, oh yeah, I remember this part. Yeah, this is where he kills the falsely accused woman. And you're like, oh fuck. But then you read it again, you're like, wait a minute. No, she poisons people.
Did. Yeah, she did.
She did that shit.
Yeah, and that's
it's just that other character didn't give a fuck.
Yeah. And that's like what we talked about last episode, where we talked about this layering that he has in like, and that you can probably find that pretty much in every chapter or like a paragraph or something. You will find something like that something that you thought on one read through, which was just a practical kind of like getting from point A to point B, will become so much more than that if you like read closely. Not that you have to read it closely, like you can enjoy this without like going into that sort of detail, but like it is something that is really rewarding, I think, rereading. Not that I've reread it, but like I will, I think. Yeah, so yeah, that's definitely a great point. And another example of why he's such a fucking great writer.
I did reread some pages while going through this, just getting distracted and going, wait, where was I? And in rereading pages that I just read and felt I understood, like a broad stroke, like I got what was going on. He's going through a cave. Now he's upon this old city. There's weird statues. There's like man apes. Going back and rereading the page and getting a more textured, like I already know the abstract. And then I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened? Go back and go, oh, holy shit. What the fuck? And then sometimes you even miss like a whole fucking fight scene because he's just like, and then I spun around and cut off his head and took his this and that. And it's like, God damn, you did all that?
Yeah, he did do all that.
Yeah, he did. One of the things that like stuck with me the whole book was something very early on with the man whose skin is green, the Green Man.
Mm-hmm.
That's the like the weirdest shit that never, of everything in the book, like some of it I think does have some kind of puzzle piece, like you can get it. It's like this does mean something and there is some kind of like resolution somewhere that's like, oh, that's what was going on. But the Green Man is just like this weird, like, what the fuck was that? Like,
I get the sense that is foreshadowing to something that's going to happen later in the book, like in the other volumes. But it seems like, I don't know, I got something from like that he's from another dimension or something like that. Like that's what I got from that. So yeah, that was the most enigmatic part of it for me as well. But I'm definitely thinking that is paid off later in like volume 3 or 4.
That would make sense because, especially not just because of the faces David's making, but also because of whenever.
No, I was gonna say, do you guys want to know? No, you guys don't want to know. No, like I know there's the whole thing about spoilers, but no, I won't say anything. No,
right?
Because like he is also shown a portal, like later on in the, so like there's hints, and there were things paid off in Claw that were just hinted at in Shadow that you go, oh, what the fuck? Okay, yeah. So yeah, you got to kind of trust that like Wolfe, as weird as it is, and as I really don't think this is a hard story to follow. As much like people always want to talk about Book of the New Sun is like, well, I don't even what's going on. But as mysterious as it all is, it does always seem to have some kind of payoff. So that's what like that, because within this book there was none. It was like, what was he like? You know, Severian is even like, he calls him a vegetable man, and he's like, if you were really a vegetable, wouldn't you have leaves growing out of your head? And the dude is like, I'm not a vegetable. What the fuck?
That actually reminds me. Have you guys ever read China Mayville?
Mm-hmm.
The cactus people.
Oh,
that just reminds me of the cactus people because you're talking about people of vegetables. But the cactus people were really cool. Like they were just basically anthropomorphic cactus people.
Oh hell yeah.
It was great. Anyway, in terms of the Green Man and those mysteries, this is the difference between someone like Gene Wolfe and someone like fucking J.J. Abrams and like the mystery box kind of writing, which is like, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You're just like, here's a mystery. Let's throw a random polar bear on a tropical island. Yeah. And then like, we'll work it out later. Like, whereas like, I completely trust that is not a random thing in Gene Wolfe. Like either in conception or like when he was writing it or just in the book itself. Like you can tell that this is a very deliberate like thing that he's going to answer or at least give some kind of perspective on later. It's not like this modern form of writing. It's like, oh, and then a witch turned up for no reason. Like it's not like that, you know?
This is where metafiction kind of killed narrative in a way, is because that's a fun way to write. You can write like that, but like clean it up before you ship it out to people to read, you know. Write with knowing you're like, I have no idea where I'm going, you know, this is just as mysterious to me as, you know, anybody who's going to read it, but figure it out somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
Like put that shit together.
I don't want to know that that's what you got to hide that process from the reader or the watcher or whatever, like that it needs to feel like that it all makes sense in the end, you know, that it wasn't just a random assortment of events, you know. So yeah, it's interesting how he'll throw the most random shit like at you in these books, and because he's such a great writer and because you can tell that, like, you know, it's all connected and it's really about exploring this world, that he is going to like give you something more about it. It's not just like this random thing. It's not that mystery box sort of writing, which I really fucking hate.
Yeah. Oh man, Lost killed that for me. And I thought the polar bear on the exotic island, like that's the perfect thing to use as an example, because when I saw that in the show, I was like, what the fuck? This is getting crazy. And then it's like, oh, they come from this Dharma facility, and it's like, oh, okay. So what is that? And then it's like, well, they were dead and this is purgatory. It's like, why would there be polar bears? Like, what the fuck?
Polar bears have souls, you see.
Yeah.
See, that would have been more interesting if like they kind of unwound it that way, that like you know, all the animals have souls and that's why they're in purgatory.
It's like, okay, well, keep going.
Whereas like, and to some extent, like you can't, you know, if you introduce a mystery and you completely demystify it, you can't, if you go all that way as well, it doesn't become as fun either. So there's a balance to be struck, I think, between like knowing what the mystery is, but not necessarily going into all the because that's the other thing that ruined Lost, is that it went into too much detail. Like it was like, we threw in this random thing and now let's over explain it.
Yeah. You know? How the numbers all mean
over explain it in a really unsatisfying way. Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to talk as well about like how I think we mentioned that David said that it was like a more novelistic novel, and I really kind of vibed with that as well, because as I was reading it, it just reminded me of what the novel can actually do as opposed to other kind of forms. And it's really interesting given the genre that it's in as well, because, you know, it's fantasy, I guess is what you would call it. Sometimes it's called science fiction, which I guess it technically is, but I think Gene Wolfe preferred to call it science fantasy, which is a bit having a bob each way, but like what I think this book also does in terms of like the novel and fantasy novels in particular is it kind of plays out the contradiction that I think is at the heart of like the fantasy novel, like at least the modern form of it. Because I don't know how familiar you guys are with the genre, but when you think about it, like most fantasy novels are trying to bring back something like the epic, you know, like the epic poem, like Beowulf, Homer, like the Iliad, all that sort of stuff. And even in the modern kind of examples of that, we've got like Tolkien, who basically explicitly said that he wanted to build this kind of epic mythology for England. And like he felt that England didn't have like this mythology due to the Norman conquests. And that's where the impetus for Lord of the Rings came from. But what I think is interesting about the fantasy novel as like a genre, I guess, is that it's trying to bring back the epic in novelistic form, because the epic used to be like, you know, pure storytelling sort of stuff, like poetry, like people would recite it, like it was all about heroic deeds and things like that. And all of those things are kind of characterized by kind of monolithic narrative structures where there's like this single authoritative voice that kind of presents a unified worldview, like, because that's what the ancient epics are all about, right? It's all about like this monolith of myth. And so they depict historical events or mythical events or whatever, heroes, all that sort of shit. And that kind of gives us kind of collective view of society. So the epic is always like, its voice is always really solemn and timeless. And it's kind of detached from individuality and those sorts of perspectives. Whereas I think that the novel is kind of more dynamic. And I think what fantasy novels try to do is they try to do away with the dynamism of the novel and like try to shoehorn the novelistic form into that old epic idea of like heroes and daring doing that sort of shit, and not really taking advantage of the fact that the novel is able to do so much more than that and give you multiple perspectives, give you like a more, I guess, individualistic modern view of the world, which I think is really interesting. And I think that he plays that out in this basically cycle, because he's trying to like make fantasy more novelistic, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah. So I just think that's interesting, because most fantasy novels, I don't think, are written with like getting at that potential of the novel as a form anyway, because the novel can like encompass so many different things, whereas what they're trying to do is they're trying to like your Brandon Sanderson types, right? They are trying to, the novel is like, they're not even thinking about the novel as a formal vessel. They're just thinking about it as a delivery system.
Delivery system for lore and for characters fucking looking at each other all the time.
Yes.
They look at then he looked at her and smirked, and she looked at him and grinned and cocked an eyebrow and tilted a head. What you're saying is so fucking smart. It's one of my favorite points that I've heard on a podcast recently. And it reminds me of a guy called Danny Nemu. He wrote this book called Neuropocalypse. Now, Danny Nemu is of a religion, I want to say it's called Daime. And it's in South America, very Book of the New Sun appropriate. And it's based around drinking ayahuasca. So you get all fucked up. Like you ritualistically take ayahuasca. But Neuropocalypse is so fascinating because it's about the Bible. Nemu's thesis in the book is that the Bible is supposed to mirror a human brain, right? Specifically the way that it's written in Hebrew, where it doesn't have vowels. It's just a string of consonants, and how you can input different vowels and get different words and different interpretations, et cetera, et cetera. The fact that there are so many contradictions, the Sam Harris, like, oh, the Bible says one thing here and then another thing somewhere else. Nemu would say, yeah, that's intentional. It's supposed to be contradictory. It's supposed to be at odds with itself, like the human brain, right? And what's so interesting about what you're saying is that is what the novel does, right? It mimics and accentuates and makes our brains better by exposing our minds to themselves and to others' minds, right? It's actually good for you. It's actually healthy to read novels for that reason. In terms of how it approaches fantasy, I really do think you can break it down into, there are people who are like us. We'll just call us the cool guys. Why not?
The
right?
exalted.
Yeah. The exalted.
And
yeah.
And then the others are like Hathor. What's his name? Is it Hathor, the stuttering retard guy? No, the other half are the autists who want books to be information delivery mechanisms, right? Where conversation is it's not a generative, rhizomatic field upon which you can interact. Like, information is supposed to lead to a conclusion. And that's what lore is. That's what most fantasy is. And I love this idea of Gene Wolfe noticing that and saying, okay, but how do I make my Bible? I mean, the book of the new sun, besides being extremely, and you will see, extremely biblical, right? And Gene Wolfe being a practicing Catholic, the mimicking of the structure and feel of the Bible as this organic living brain is so present throughout the whole thing that I think that splitting these two camps off into people who want to make D&D stat-based rule books and people who want to make Bibles is very cool, right? And Gene Wolfe wrote a Bible, basically.
Yeah, but I have seen like stuff online where people have tried to make a game out of this too. So
Oh wow, that sounds awesome. Sure.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not going to front. I'd probably play it if it was so. I mean, if I saw a Book of the New Sun, D&D rule book and game, I'd be like, I mean, I'll play it. Sure.
They make games and comic books out of the Bible too. So
yeah, like I just think it's really interesting how he kind of pushes the, I guess you would say, affordances of the novel to their limit in a way that a lot of fantasy novels don't. Like, they just don't do that. Like, it's like you said, it's the information delivery system, but it also, in a way, it kind of is harkening back to like the whole epic, because epic fantasy, it's even in the name of the genre, where that you have this like legendarium sort of sense, which is this like far off, it's ossified, it cannot be like altered in any way. Whereas like the modern like novel it's not that. Like the novel it is one of the most modern forms, actually. Like, it's only been around for a couple hundred years, and it incorporates so many things, and not just different kinds of texts, different kinds of like artworks, different kinds of people. There's even like different registers that you can have in a novel that you can't have in like an epic poem. Like, the epic poem is one register, and that's fine, but like the novel like encompasses so much more. So when you write a novel and you're not like trying to like push at the limits of what it can do, because it can do a lot, like it just seems very paltry. Like,
do you think that the reason why there's this divide between the Brandon Sanderson lore-based D&D style and the Gene Wolfe novelistic style is because people who have the types of brains that we do, where we are imaginative and susceptible to we could probably be hypnotized really easily. I'm assuming we can get hypnotized. Like, we could read a book like, I don't know, Mrs. Dalloway or something like or whatever. And we're there, like we're in that setting, we're in her head. Like, we are just, we don't need the lube to get into that. Whereas fantasy people who are autistic and are very, facts and rule based and reality based, like, they actually need the setting of dragons and knights and magicians and whatever. Like, it has to simultaneously be rule based so that they can follow it, but aesthetically and quote unquote visually fantastical in order for them to get to where we are if we're reading a Reddit post about somebody who lives in their basement. You know what I mean? Like, we already have that connection. They don't. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, like they need to be, it needs to be downloaded into them in a way.
Well, that's I guess the point that I'm trying to make is with that is like, why is fantasy so popular among these types of people? And I would argue, or sci-fi for that matter, sci-fi fantasy, genre fiction. And I would say that it has to be on its face more fantastical to even get them into the same field that we're playing on. right? Like we don't need, like if the three of us see a dragon or read about a dragon, we're like, okay, cool. Like it's the same functionally to us as reading like a Welbeck book, right? We're in it in the same way, but that these images, metonyms, archetypes are necessary for people who don't do that.
Yeah.
In order for them to get on that same playing field.
I totally get what you're saying, because like when I see something like that, I'm like, yeah, well, what are you going to do with it? Like, it's not the thing itself that is appealing to me. Right. It's like what? Okay, what are you going to do with it now? Like, is something interesting going to happen?
So like, we don't just look at a dragon and go like, yes, exactly. Yeah, that's it. The dragon.
Yeah. And you hear interviews with those kind of authors too, and I admire how much fun they're having, but it's just like, it's exactly that. It's like, so in my world, which is exactly like Harry Potter, except that that game that they play is like, it more resembles basketball, right? But it's like this medieval type of basketball, and you're like, bro, so why? What do you but then what are you gonna do? Like, it's just
medieval type.
It's like a thing, basketball. It's like a thing, but it's different. So and that's why I think that people, after you've read the whole book, I would not recommend doing this now because you'll get spoilers and shit. But like on sci-fi Reddit, people are like, why do people say this book is good?
Yeah.
This is not good. Like, what happened? And then, I mean, I have this with my students too, when we're talking about poetry, they'll be like, but what happened in that poem? And I'm like, exactly what happened. But they're children, so they can say that. Adults should be like, let me try to figure this shit out. A little bit of fucking curiosity would be nice from other adults. I think that's my mantra right now. It's like, can you be a little curious, whether it's political, science, like whatever, like, do you have no curiosity at all about anything? But it's no mistake that the kinds of people who are still wearing masks are also huge Brandon Sanderson fans, I think.
Yeah. I just think one of it's played out in the, other people have done this in like more, I guess, quote unquote, literary novels, like experimenting with the form a little bit more. But Gene Wolfe, I think, is one of the few like fantasists, I guess, who plays with the potential of the novel in the sense of like, exploring the dynamism, even like multiple registers and voices too, because it's like he doesn't do the thing where, actually he does do this. Like, it's all from one guy's point of view, but then you get these digressions, you get these that like interrupt the flow of the story. So it's like this voice within a voice. And then there's also, like we said, the text, which we'll talk about later, like the play and the tale and things like that. So he is bringing that stuff in rather than just making it all one guy's story. So he's like, it's that there's like some technical literary term for it, like multi-vocality or something like that the novel can really kind of do that, epic poems and even to some extent movies can't quite do in the same way. So he's really willing to go there in a genre that never really does it, a genre that doesn't really experiment. And if it does, it experiments in a way that is, like, instead of my dragons, it's going to be like some other weird giant reptile. You know what I mean? Like, so
yeah.
Geckos,
salamanders. Yeah.
I think
by
there's
the way, just real quick. This is not a huge point, but I think that if this was to be a movie, reading Claw, I figured out who the director would have to be, and it would have to be Tarsem Singh, the guy who did The Fall and The Cell. Yeah. Like, that's the only person who could do it. All right, that's it.
What's he doing now? I wonder. Anyway.
Fucking nothing.
I think there is a hunger for that kind of like, because I think the only reason I ever got into literary fiction, not that some like good shit is good shit wherever it comes from. But like, the more genre shit I can find to fuck with, I much more prefer genre than just like, a metafictional tale about my summer in New York or whatever. Like, but it's experimental, and I'm like, okay, well, I fuck with that part, but like, could you maybe throw a dragon in here? But or cyborg or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there is a hunger for that, and it just takes the type of king to just not give a flying fuck, because those people who don't fuck with that, who hold their fantasy precious, are gonna hate it. They're gonna hate it so much.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things that gets me. Like, I've got to stop before we do these episodes. I've got to stop reading like the Goodreads reviews, the Reddit and stuff like that, because like I get so fucking livid reading these things. Like, I never get, like, I don't really care if people fuck with or don't like people that I like, but like this in particular is so annoying because like they get it so wrong. So I'll read on like, Goodreads, your Brandon Sanderson kind of retarded Hathor kind of reader, like moaning about how like it doesn't conform to certain fantasy genre tropes. It's like lots of screeching about like, well, what's the magic system? It's just like, who the fuck cares? Like, you could be appreciating the actual magic of the book because it succeeds in like resuscitating this like epic sense while also being an actual fucking bona fide novel, like, whereas what about the magic system? It's so stupid.
Is this sci-fi? Is this fantasy? Shut the fuck up and read the book.
Shut the fuck up and submit, like
it's cool. We can all agree it's cool. Like, if you don't think this book is cool, you're gay.
Yeah.
I was thinking that like, and I don't know why Stephen King gets a pass where it's like everybody is always like, yeah, he's a horror writer. I'm like, but have you actually read a Stephen King book though? Like, Gene Wolfe is much more like slick with the words and shit. But in Claw of the Conciliator, there were times where I was like, this is kind of Kingish. How it just like, because he'll fixate on some random shit and just go in on it. And you're like, all right, we're going shopping with this character now. And that's what we're doing for a while. And then we'll get back to the car that's a killer. But like right now we're going shopping. And it's like, I guess there's too many things that can piss people off, where it's like, no, you can't be confusing and also fuck with the structure and also not explain anything and leave it up to me to figure it out and this and that. Whereas somebody like King is like, he is doing that kind of thing, but he's so blue collar, just like this happens, and this happens, and this happens, that he gets a pass, I guess.
Yeah. Definitely.
On the Stephen King tip, this book amps up, because it's the journey, right? This book amps up the monsters so much. So you have the man-apes, you have
glowing
the nodules.
Glowing,
yeah. You have the whips in the antechamber. You have the servant of Abaya. What do they don't call her the odalisque, right? The odalisque of Abaya, which to me was really fucking scary. Like, when I like that the odalisque of Abaya is what saved Severian and Guile, but she's in the water so much that like she's hot. By the way, I'm going like 15 directions here, but this is such a cool book. This is so much hornier than Shadow of the Torturer, right? Like, Severian loves to fuck. And he's even horny for the 60-foot tall, because she's 40 cubits, which are 18 inches. Thank you, Gene Wolfe, for providing the thing in the back. So a 60-foot woman, and he's like talking about how big her titties are, like, as she's in the river. But then it's fucking terrifying. She stands up and all of her, like, she's waterlogged, so like all of her skin like sags down. Like, he killed, like, I even thought the nodules were scary, like the little shadow bats that are attracted to heat. there's something I've heard people call this the Dark Souls of books, right? Dark Souls is a video game. It's in a fantasy world, and it's notorious for its difficulty and for also not holding your hand. You have to kind of like find out what's going on as you play the game. And I think that's what makes these things so fucking scary. Like the notchwolves were scary to me both times, actually, because you don't know the whole time they're running from them. You have no idea what the fuck is going on, right? It's a big shadowy bat that's going after them. And then he hits the bat with his sword and he gets blasted with heat. And Jonas, his companion, his cyborg companion, is very frightened of them, but you're just like, I don't know what the fuck these are, right? The man apes, like there's a scene where he looks into their eyes and he's like, and when I saw the way their eyes looked, I realized that they were, I think he uses the line like more human than I am or something like that. Like this is like where humans are going. Mm-hmm. He has this way of bringing in this eschatological, apocalyptic scariness to the monsters in the book.
The man apes especially, like I was just fully getting Island of Dr. Moreau, like, and clearly that's an inspiration for them as well, particularly because of the human-like characteristics of them, because at first he thinks they're very bestial and stuff, and then sees the humanity behind the eyes.
Oh, and then the walking statues.
Oh, right?
Yeah. I think that's when the Tarsum Singh thing came into my mind.
Also, Doctor Who stole that idea too.
Oh, with the angels?
Yeah. The angels, yeah. So so much has been stolen from this book, by the way.
Go on.
Like that man apes scene, which, like I said, I think it's a direct reference to the Island of Dr. Moreau, but like it's also that part I think was stolen by Stephen King, because there is a part in The Gunslinger in the first book of The Dark Tower that's very reminiscent of that, where he's like fighting against these, like, I think they were called slow mutants, in like this kind of cave-like area.
You are so like the Dark Tower is Stephen King's Book of the New Sun. Mm-hmm. You're totally right. Yeah, like he read this and he's like, what if this was dumber?
Because he actually did start it like a year after the first book was published, I think. Shadow
really?
of Torture.
Okay. Yeah. I see you, Stephen.
Let's
King,
get the conspiracy corkboard out and like.
Yeah, let's get it out. No, I'm here for all the Stephen King shade. It can't be overstated how creepy and dark and scary Claw of the Conciliator is. Like, it's a really frightening book, which I also think that when, talking about the Goodreads reviews, I think when people get genuinely disturbed and scared, they give it a bad review and then they try to rationalize why they didn't like it. They're like, oh, well, it's because it didn't do that. And it's like, no, it fucked with the book fucked with you. It put you in a weird headspace. Welcome to what novels can do, motherfucker. As Evan said 2 episodes ago on Agitator, he's like, some of us like feeling bad.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And this is a book that makes you feel bad for the most part.
Broaden your horizons about what entertainment is. Because I'm very much about like, I want to sit down and I want to be entertained. But like entertained doesn't mean like coddled, like I don't need to feel pleasure constantly at like, or the images and the beautiful sentences. Like I can feel bad too. Like that's part of being entertained as well. Yeah. Like who wants to feel good all the time,
Mm-hmm.
And dude, some of the images, like when they roll Thekla out with the wax mask over her face, or when the Kakajins in the audience like take their crepe paper masks off and they have these tube mouths with like fucking like eel teeth, not eels. You know what I'm talking about? Like spiral teeth. Yeah, like the way I saw it is like they have like these tube mouths with like just teeth in a circle. Right. Yeah. And they kind of like slither off or whatever. Like, it's not like, oh, that's cool. You're like, that fucking sucks. I would hate that if I saw that. Like, that's not good.
Kelby, you were going to say something?
Yeah, that's why I keep like so many books on deck. Most of the time lately, we've been doing so much shit for content, like, you know, guesting on podcasts like this, or we've been reading for Agitator, that like I have been reading, this is what I'm reading, and then this is what I'm reading. But a lot of the times I have so much shit on deck because it just depends on how I want to feel. It's like, this is all good, but am I in the mood for like something that makes me feel kind of warm and like familiar, like with this? And it's just like, yeah, cool. I'm just turning the brain off. Or if like, which is pretty much everybody's default mode for entertainment these days, is like, it's just something to unplay. It's like, that really is fine sometimes, but do you never want to feel anything else? Like, do you never want to feel anything? Like, sometimes I want some shit to make me cry, like,
yeah,
like hurt
that's
my
why
feelings.
the Agitator Tuesdays with Maury episodes could be so lit. Like,
you should
the
actually
5 people
do that.
you meet in heaven. Read Tuesdays with Maury.
Yeah.
Fucking read Flowers for Algernon.
It's always retarded, the shit that makes me cry.
Such as, give us an example. Get vulnerable, Kelby.
Pretty well, music is an easy example. Lately I just I've had like Evanescence has been kind of my release valve for the past few weeks. All the bullshit compiling, I've just been like, My Immortal goes on repeat, and I'm just like, it just, okay,
are you a millennial by any
better.
chance?
And a Pisces, so
oh yeah, of course, it makes sense. I want to talk briefly, like, I know this isn't really like a prose podcast, but like, we're all writers here, so we can talk a little bit about it. But the language in it, very similar to you know, obviously Shadow of the Torturer. He does the same kind of thing, and that adds to that sense of the novelistic playfulness as well that I was talking about before. But I think Gene Wolfe has this sort of knack for being able to lean into the dreaminess, the abstraction, the complexity, but he also does do that Stephen King style of like, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then this happened. So he's like struck that balance, I think, really well. And recently my friend told me this story about, you might have heard it, about like Kingsley Amis and Martin Amis, the two famous father-son kind of writer. So Martin Amis is a real sentence level guy, like is one of those people who puzzles over every fucking sentence in every fucking book. And my friend was telling me about this interview with his father, Kingsley Amis, who was more like workmanlike in his style. Like, and he said, oh, well, you know, the problem with Martin is that Martin never writes a sentence like, and then they finished their drinks and went home. And and I think like there's two types of writers, so you can go on that kind of in that sort of direction if you want. But I think Gene Wolfe is both, like, because he will do like the really like florid lyrical sentence, but then he will also do those practical things as well. So it makes it so much more refreshing than just having to like read a series of events, or read a series of abstractions and like metaphors, and you know, gets overbearing when people do it that way as well. So, yeah, his writing is incredible, which we talked about before, but I thought we should mention that.
Yeah, that balance is great. And the prose is key to like enjoying these books. Like, you know, we throw shade to people who just obsess over prose, but like it is crucial to how these books are consumed and what makes them stand out, because it's yeah, like you said, it's like both. It's like it's not just like lyrical and it's not just rhythmic. It's, you know, especially when there's action going on, or even sometimes you get lost in the words that you're like, wait, did he just fight somebody and I totally missed it? But a lot of times the action slows down to go, I swung my sword horizontally, severed her head, busted her kneecaps out. I did like all of, and it wasn't until I saw the arterial spray that I realized I had done it correctly, that my nerves loosened up and I had actually.
And it feels like, it feels like the people that we're clowning on a lot, the Brandon Sanderson types, like they just want all of that sort of stuff. This happened, that happened kind of thing. But he gives you a little bit of that, but not enough for them to not write like really butthurt Goodreads reviews, I guess.
But then you don't get what would suck if this was just like straightforward. And like, it is weird enough that those people would be satisfied. They'd be like, they would think it's the most amazing shit they've ever read if it was more straightforward, because just the things that happen are so wildly imaginative that you'd be like, holy shit, like this is crazy. But you'd miss the feeling of it. That's what I think novels do better than any other medium, is they allow you to feel what is being conveyed like through words. You're able to like it's the only medium that when done well can force a feeling.
Yeah,
it's not subjective. It's not, well, I actually like these types of movies, so I laugh when at Martyrs or whatever, or like this. It's like, no, when it's done a certain way, like you open up a book and this is how you are going to feel. And that's how, like, that's what Gene Wolfe does with the balance of the language and the mystery and the confusion and the like forcing of interpretation and dragging things out, making you feel that time. Like when he's going into the cave and there's the colors / lights, like I'm picturing it as he's picturing it. And I'm not being told what to picture, but it's like he's not quite sure what he's seeing yet, and neither am I. And we're both going, okay, it's like this weird, like cosmic, like there's like light particles that are of different colors. And then it's like, okay, are these reflections? And then, oh, he's getting closer. And then they're like the glowing eyes of the man apes. And you're like, you start to see things clearer, but you also feel the journey towards getting there. It's not just our character is confused, but I'm going to make sure you know what's going on. It's like, no, I don't know what's going on. We're in the same boat. You know? That
to me just demonstrates a kind of certain distrust of the reader, that like they need to be like their hands need to be held at all times, and I feel like that's, some people want that, and those are the people we were talking about before. But I really love that point you make, that like the novel or a book or fiction can force that sort of feeling. In that way, they're actually probably people always say, video games, their thing is that you can interact with it. So it's like there's an interactivity there. But I think in the same way, the novel is like that, because, it's basically the writer gives it out to you and your feelings bloom out from it in your kind of meeting with what the writer has produced. And it is actually, a lot of it is actually up to you as you're reading it. So it is kind of just like a video game in the sense of that interaction, and some are better at inculcating that than others, I guess.
This is something that Gene Wolfe thinks a lot about. And that he thinks a lot about it because the Book of the New Sun, at the end of the day, is kind of about writing a book. So he did the postmodern thing. He wrote a book about writing a book. Because he thinks about it, you can look at his prose, specifically the tension between the expository bits and the more poetic and, kind of dreamlike bits. Wolfe knows that everything is about tension and release. And I think that when you talk about writers who just kind of get it, Kelby and I have talked about this a lot on Agitator. We talk about how You either have it or you don't. And it's kind of like sports or sex or whatever, like, or dancing. Some people understand it and some people don't. Music. But the thing about writing that you either understand or don't is that it's fundamentally about tension and release. That's all writing is. And that's on a sentence level. Wolfe, we might have brought it up on the Shadow of the Torturer episode, but Wolfe is really good on a sentence level of building tension in a sentence consisting of 15 words, maybe, of building tension and then releasing based on the aesthetic quality of the words that he chooses. Similarly, in a plot structure type scenario, he's very good at building tension or building dream and then releasing that with its opposite, right? So that's what you're seeing, I think, whenever you get to a certain point and you've been in Severian's mind and he's talking about the way that he feels and his reminiscences, and then it goes directly into, and then here's a good example, right? Towards the end of the book, the herder, like they're in the Pampas, Jolenta's dying. She's got, her glamour is fading. Basically the glamour magic that was making her hot is going away. And they, in a very Cormac McCarthy-esque scene, Severian has tamed a bull with the claw, and they find this hut, right? And there's an old man and his sick son in there. And what you get is a very lyrical description of the hut. From the lyrical description of the hut, you get a lyrical description of the son who is sick. And then you get this character, the actual shepherd, the herder, the ox guy, who is speaking in a kind of abstract, schizo, crazy way about things that you don't understand, right? This is a kind of tension of abstraction that's building and building and building until the son bolts upright, tells his father that they are agents of the autarch and should be, put down. He pulls out a knife. And then you get a paragraph where Severian says, so then I took the knife from him, broke his arm, put him on the bed, reset the bone, and healed it with the claw. Boom, 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 right? Tension, 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 and then release, right? It's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Conversely, right, there are other moments where it's much more, I feel like actually the man apes in the cave is much more descriptive, right? So it's description. I'm in a cave and it's dark and I'm following this stream and I can't see anything. I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I'm doing it anyway, blah, 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 blah. And then there's a short paragraph, but a paragraph nonetheless, about what Terminus S looks like in the river at the bottom, right? Like he goes into a paragraph of kind of like abstraction about how he feels about when he sees her hilt and when, and thank goodness that the letter that I have for the autarch is still in there and blah, blah, blah. You have to feel it. When you're writing these things, you can't, it's not a science that you can be like, okay, so I had this much abstraction, so now I'll be expository, right? Like you have to feel it, right? And it is actually, I brought up sex earlier, but it's similar to sex in that way, where if you're like, here's the way I'm going to have sex, and it is going to result in an orgasm 100% of the time. Let's just, for the sake of the podcast, people are listening to this, let's say that we have a 100% hit ratio, right? Like
I do.
We're not talking about us here, right? We're talking about other people who have no dick.
Homosexuals always
right?
do, but anyway.
Yeah. they always bust, bro.
Yeah.
I'm spiritually homo in that way.
And both of them do as well, by the way. Anyway.
But like when you're making love, you know what I mean? Like you can't be like, okay, so now I have to thrust this many times and then I have to pause. I have to back up on it.
It's
right?
What's Seinfeld?
What's the magic system though?
Yeah. What's the magic system?
Right? What's the lore of your penis, David?
Yeah. What's the magical system I can say to make it squirt, right? Like, but no, you feel, and writing is the same way, right? And so in that way,
I'm imagining
in that way,
okay, left, right, swirl.
It's the economy code, right?
Yeah.
But Gene Wolfe, in that respect, he's got crazy literary dick game, right? He knows where the tension points are and when to back off and when to really dig down deep.
That's a great analogy. I would also use like the analogy of cooking. Like, among my friends, I'm a pretty good cook. And so everyone's always asking me for recipes, and I don't have any recipes written down. I just do it all by feel, and you can write something according to a recipe if you want. Like cook something according to a recipe if you want. But, being able to like prepare something well is it's more about feel, because like you do it often enough that that this amount of something, you just instinctually know this stuff. You don't need to like, okay, at this point, this must go in now and it has to be this amount or whatever. And I don't know how that relates to tension and release, but it's in that ballpark.
It absolutely does though, because it is about feel, right? It is about feel. Like you could talk about tension in terms of the water getting to a certain boiling point, or the noodles getting to a certain
grilling. Dudes are
al
like
dente.
this about grilling all the time.
Absolutely.
It's like, take it off. It's like, not yet. Hold on. Now take it off.
I'm not a good cook. I'm not a good cook. So if I'm following a recipe, if I'm following a recipe, I'll get some fucked up food sometimes. And it was when, because I'm still a novice in the whole cooking game, but it was actually when I stopped looking at the times that it was recommended to do, to put to sear a steak or whatever, right? Like you do it for a minute on one side, a minute on. I'm like, no, I'm gonna feel it out. Feel it out. Like I'm gonna try to and then I'll glance at it. I'll be like, all right, cool, that's good, right? And you keep in mind that like it's still cooking after you take it out of the pan, right? You can't get that on paper because it's just gonna say like cook on one side for a minute, flip, cook it for 2 minutes on the other, and then you're good. It's like, yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, you should always be doing like basically with everything, but your own twist on whatever it is you're attempting. So it's like, and this is what Gene Wolfe does with his own twist on a fantasy novel kind of thing. Like it's like making there is a like sort of vague, I guess, platonic form of a recipe, but you don't necessarily need to kind of follow that to the T. You just sort of make it up. Like here's a ragu that I made, and it's my version of it, and it's actually very similar to the recipe, but like there's a few twists and turns that I kind of made by feel.
What did you guys think was going on with Jonas? Because I still don't really. There's a line that confused me, and I want your interpretation. Like obviously, like the baseline is he's a cyborg, right? Like he's mostly metal.
That was a fun twist too, because I originally thought he was like a cyberpunk, had a metal arm sort of thing, but he's actually all metal. Yeah.
Right. Okay. That was actually the question that I had. So he's a total robot, right? Who has some human parts, not the other way around. And he's been around since like our time, basically. Like he's been alive for maybe 1 million years. Like he's been into space. He's been back. Like, okay, cool. That's what I was wondering. Actually, it was like, did he start off human, or has he never been human? I also love again that like he falls in love with Jolene. Like this book is so horny, dude. It's like this guy's been alive for 1 million years, and like he just sees this chick with thick thighs and big boobs, and he's like, I have never felt love like this before.
Interestingly, she's artificial as well. So that she's an artificial like woman, and he's an artificial man. So
Right, in a
Maybe that's
sense,
not too
right?
bad,
Yeah,
yeah.
because she's a hag, but she's got the glamour
Yeah,
on
she's
her,
got the big
or whatever.
boobs.
Or did I miss something?
Yeah, no, it's
Is
the
there
glamour.
something
Yeah,
more
she's
to
got
it?
the big boobs.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
like she's
She's not a cyborg though, right? Like
no,
she's
but in the
she's a
sense that her
person.
image is fake. Like she's not.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. That again.
She's like those bitches that are on fucking TikTok and OnlyFans with the huge tits and like the big like Brazilian butt lifts and shit like that.
This book had so much more mention of boobs in it than Shadow. Shadow was so sexless that like I didn't realize that Severian and Thecla had sex until the second time I read it. I was like, oh, they banged. Okay, cool. Yeah, I didn't get that. In this one, he's just like, I saw her titties. I had to have them, you know?
I really want to get to talking about Thecla as well, who does return in this book. But I really need to piss first. Should we take a short break?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You guys all good for a little while?
I'm good. It's Saturday, dude. I'm partying.
Awesome. All right. Be back in a sec. All right. Just leave it.
Leave it rolling.
Fuck it, we'll do it live. All right, so he took his headphones off, so he can't hear us, I think. Do you know what happens with the Green Man?
No, I don't know what happens with the Green Man.
Do you want to know?
You know he's gonna listen to this.
Oh shit, it's recording. Yeah, that's true. check your phone. I sent you what happens.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did.
You're like, I don't give a fuck if you want to. Hell yeah. I was kind of hoping for that. I was like, give me just one thing, Gene. Give me just one thing to like. But I kind of
the whole time you were like, there's no way I can subtly tell anybody that. You know what I mean? Like you either tell them or you don't.
I kind of feel like it would be that way too, because what I felt was implied with that at the end of that scene, right? Like with the whetstone, is like, how would you return to that?
Yeah, no, Gene Wolfe doesn't give a fuck.
I really want to get to the play because you hate it and I kind of love it.
Hate is a very strong word. I was definitely feeling it. Okay, so I have complex feelings about it, but I'll let y'all start. Dr. Talos's play.
Are we going to do that first? I want to talk about Thecla.
Oh no,
first.
It's your show. Yeah, I'm all like, this is what we're going to talk about.
That's all right. I love that. I love when someone comes in and like, takes over. It's fun.
I bet you do.
I don't actually. But anyway. All right. So, Thecla. So she comes back in a sense in this book. So she died in the first one. First of all, there's the trap, which we sort of alluded to before, which was basically Agia, who was the bitch whose twin got killed in the little plant duel last volume. And she's like concocted this plan, and that's how he runs into the man apes, because she writes this letter that like, oh, Thecla's still alive, and she's writing this letter and she entraps him. That turns out to be all fake, but we do meet her in a very interesting scene where Severian hooks up with Vodalus again in the forest, which that was a really cool scene too, like traipsing around the forest with his merry band, kind of like Robin Hood. But also you get more like character to him, and he's sort of like, did you get the sense he was sort of dark and broody as well, but while also being kind of happy chap? Like I kind of like that about him, that characterization.
Yeah, he does feel like Robin Hood and his merry men, but like a goth version.
Yeah, yeah. And also like the way he's described too, like you know how from the very beginning Severian's like, I love this guy. Like and I do too. Like I mean, I would even turn gay for him.
Damn.
Yeah,
you'd go that extra mile.
Yeah. So yeah, but then there's this scene where they have the banquet. I think even the chapter is called The Banquet, isn't it? Like where they basically there's this procession of and it kind of a tribute to Thecla, but not really. It's sort of like they're basically going to eat her. And the way that's described, where she's sort of in this cast, isn't she? Like a old style kind of medieval feast. You know, when they kind of made the kind of mythical animal shape, and then you could eat it, like, and it was a pie or a pheasant or something inside. It kind of gave me those vibes. And then sort of they kind of present her, and then everyone starts eating roast Thecla. And then, but also importantly, they take this essence of Alzabo. And so Alzabo is an animal from, I think it's from another planet. I'm not
it's an alien, yeah.
Not indigenous to Earth, and so they take this kind of hormone or potion made out of it or whatever, because the animal has this ability to kind of mimic whatever it eats. And when it eats humans, it kind of, you know, can start talking like them and has their memories and things like that.
Super creepy.
It's
super
really
creepy creature. And then he describes it as an animal that shows up to howl at the doors of homes where children have died. Like if a child dies, the Alzaba will come up and howl. And that to me was very chilling, very spooky.
That also reminded me as well. This is another reason, you know, it's another person who's stolen from Gene Wolfe, and I'm all about stealing things, so I'm not throwing shade here. But have you guys seen or read Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer?
Seen it,
yeah.
The bear.
Yeah, I've seen it.
The bear scene where it's like it's just killed that chick and like is using her voice.
It's like yeah. Super spooky. I hadn't read Book of the Doosan when I watched. I can also talk about me and Jeff Vandermeer's conflicts at some point if you want.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah,
I used to know him back in the day too. Actually, I never had any conflicts with him, but I knew someone who did. So there's some tea for you, but probably for different reasons that you had conflicts with him. Because But anyway, we'll get into that.
I just had conflicts with him because he's a dickhead. But yeah. No.
So yeah, basically they eat Thecla, and like it's a ritual that the Vodalist crew have. Is it just the Vodalist crew? Or do you think it's like the Exalted in general do this? I wasn't kind of clear on that. Like the eating.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. That's an interesting question. I would say it's, man. It could be the Exaltants. I thought it was like a Vodalist thing. Yeah, for sure. Because it feels very
goth.
I described it earlier as like midsummer, right? Yes. It feels very midsummery to me. And that feels to me like people who'd be in the woods and riding around on elephants, and but I could see Exaltants eating the fucking, adrenochrome Alzabo mixture.
So everyone feeds on, her corpse. It's roasted, thankfully, not fresh, because it wouldn't be very fresh, because a certain amount of time has passed since she died. But the ritual is called the sharing, which is the idea is that you kind of absorb some of their memories and things like that, so they can live on. And so for the rest of the narrative, Severian has Thecla there as well, and I'm assuming for the rest of the entire series too. And those passages are really interesting. I like what he does there, formally, like where it's just like we're in Thecla's head now, sort of, but not really. Those are really cool moments. I love those.
Yeah, especially because you can't really tell that it's Thecla later on until you get about halfway down the paragraph. Because like you'll be reading it and because he reminisces like he does when he's at the, what the hell is his building called? The torturer building? Nessus?
But that's the city.
That's the city.
What's the
Mattachine Tower.
Thank you. Yes. So he'll be like, oh, and I was in the halls, and that's the way the Thecla paragraphs start. And it'll be like, and as a young girl who had not yet bled. Like, wait, what the fuck? Hold on. Let's go. Like, it begins to.
So that is interesting too, because it's like, I'd have to examine the passage again, because I did think I marked it down. But at what point is that happening, though? Is that happening as he's writing it, or is that like his remembrance of it happening?
Ooh,
that is really cool.
This is a big whole Book of the New Sun question.
Okay,
you've hit on something that I think we'll save for 2 months from
okay, all right.
Once we read Citadel, the Autar.
Okay,
but yeah, it's a good question for sure.
Interesting. But yeah, those were really trippy, those bits, and I do love that you have that hangover of like it is like a good paragraph, but before you notice it, you're like, oh shit, it's her. And that was just really great. And that's that sort of thing that like in a lesser writer, you would be like, this is such a fucking annoying gimmick.
But he uses it as an actual device too. It's what helps them get out of the antechamber, right? Like they know how to do that because of her memories.
Yeah, so she remembers the phrase or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that when people get annoyed by stuff like this, it's because it's just a device, right? And Wolfe, again, this book should be taught, actually. Like if I wasn't teaching 11th graders, like the Book of the New Sun, we would just go over this first half of a semester, right? Like a chapter a day. The entire
education system should just be the Book of the New Sun.
Just this book, right? Because you have to, if you're gonna have a device in your book that puts the ghost or the memories or however you want to think of it of this woman into this guy, that's cool from a punch you in the gut emotional response type thing. Like you can be like, oh, how sad that she's dead, right? But Wolfe is like, not good enough. That's not good enough. Like what are we going to do with it? And he does something with everything, even if you don't think he's doing something with everything.
Oh, and there is a bit later on as well where he's talking about Dorcas and Jolenta, when he's talking about his approach to women, and they're like how like, yeah, it's good to put it away now and again, but like, women are nice for other reasons. When he's like, do you remember that passage where he's talking about, you can love people not just from a position of desire, and that like, they have other things going on. It's like, oh, there's some nice growth.
Is that the one where he talks about how he actually loved all the women, right?
Yes,
like that's how it ends, right? He's like, and so I loved Agia and Dorcas and Jolenta and Thecla and Thea and like, yeah, I remember that one.
And so now he has the Thecla within him, and like he can't really desire her body anymore because he's fucking eating it. But like, but yeah, it's this more, I guess, platonic idea of like caring for someone,
right?
Becomes literalized.
This book in general is really good, I think, about like running the gamut of how men feel about women, right? All the characters are attractive to him for a different reason, which I really related to because I like all women of all types, right? I don't, when people say, what's your type? I'm like, women. And so I feel Severian here. He has another passage too, where he is essentially, Wolfe is elucidating like a straight guy thing with, between Jolenta and Dorcas, right? Wolfe puts it much more delicately than this, right? But what he's essentially saying in the passage is that Jolenta is like the aesthetic, like she's got the golden ratio, like big boobs, big ass, thighs, beautiful hair, lips, eyes, all this kind of stuff. And then he goes, but Dorcas just had that slut in her, you know, like, and that's he puts it better than that. But what he's saying is like, but when I look at Dorcas, it's just like, you know, and I felt that. I was like, yeah, that's true. It's not the pretty ones. It's the ones with the neck tattoo, right? Where you're like,
it was the fat girls in high school who gave all the head, like that in my experience. So not in my direct experience, but
because you were like, ew.
No, more like I want to be the fat girl. I had this girl actually, and she was the fat girl who gave all the guys head in high school. And like for a very brief period, my family lived in a house where we had a pool, and this is very good. This was revolutionary in because we lived in Northern Australia, which is basically like the South in the US, so it's really fucking hot and humid. So we were always in the pool. And I decided like one night in high school while my parents were away, I had like a little party. And yeah, she was like sucking off all the guys, like swimming in the pool with her tits out and everything. So it's like, it's very that energy, you know, like,
God bless her.
Yeah.
And then he's like, you know, and then there's big ones and small ones, you know, like Severian is just my kind of guy.
These are honestly a few of my favorite.
Do y'all think that he raped Jolenta or that they had consensual sex?
Maybe it could have been a gray area moment where it's like, you know, I wouldn't call that rape, but you know,
I think like when
it all comes down to like one line, right? Because like the reason why I ask is because at the very end he's like, and then it's like I saw her in a certain kind of way. They kiss, right? Like they kiss, so it's kind of like, oh, and he's like, and then I looked at her, and then I took her, and I was like. And then later on, he's like, after I had taken her multiple times, and like in my fucked up head, I'm thinking of just like multiple rapes on this boat, like as it's like floating down the river.
I think that's probably just a language thing, because that's like a, you know, take me now sort of thing. That's
an old school. Yeah. That's how I kind of took that. Was just like
that's how you took it.
That's how you took it.
Yeah, that's how I took it.
You let Uncle Gene rape you. Yeah. So let's talk about the play.
Yeah.
Okay. So I get the sense, and probably David is better suited to speculate on this, or like maybe tell us a bit more about this. I get the sense that the play is foreshadowing something. And I think it's something to do with like Dr. Talos's true nature, but I'm not sure. That's what I get anyway. At the very least, I think the play helps round out his character a little bit, but that remains to be seen, I think, in the other volumes, because it's, you know, it's obviously written by him. And a lot of people say that the play, so basically you come to a chapter and it is set out like a play, and it's like a play script that you read for like, it's a pretty fucking long chapter. It's like, what is it? Like 30 pages or something like that. And I liked it, probably because, you know, I have written plays and I used to love the theater. I don't so much anymore, but it was fun to read it. And also what I found entertaining about it was imagining the novel's characters playing the roles as I read along. So that was really fun. Like lots of like stuff that I've seen online, a lot of people do not fuck with this section, but like I love it because I'm picturing like Baldandas being like the the what's that character's name? Nod?
Nod.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Nod.
And also Severian and everyone playing their parts. And then it going like the narrative sort of playing out as it's been suggested in The Shadow of the Torturer, like how the story goes, but then just reading it like was really, really funny. And some of the, there are some funny moments in the play too. So the play itself, I found entertaining, but it was mostly just, what's going on here with Dr. Talos, and also imagining them like playing out the script, which is, I think, is another example of how he puts in something that is essentially a digression, but like does something more with it. Because like I didn't read that as a play. I read that as, and this is what Severian is saying in his line. This is what Jalent is doing. This is what Baldanders is doing. And I pictured it that way. It wasn't necessarily just reading a play. But I think maybe a lot of people who didn't fuck with this section, who are complaining, were just reading it as a play. I don't know. What did you guys think?
I read it exactly like that, and I loved it. I also sped through it more. If it was just the structure, it's a play format, so it's just like boom. So I was kind of like, okay, cool. This is like sliding down the roller coaster. Like, let's, I just barreled through that chapter. And yeah, no, he does so much because it's not how, it's a structural digression. It's like not the way any of the rest of the book is written. So you already have these images floating with you, and you're already sunk into the story in a certain way. And then when he skirts off in this direction with like a totally different format, you're carrying the remnants of the rest of that with you. So you're just like, you don't need to be told that they're, behaving a certain way, or like, this is how the play goes, but how they're delivering it is like, no, I'm imagining how they're delivering it because I know these characters, like, I've already been with them and everything. And so that, I liked how it could do all of that. That's something he does a lot by carrying you into the story, doing a really good job of putting you in the head of Severian and everything. He does have beautiful descriptions of things, like, but also sometimes it's just like old town, dirt road, like open field, and but you see it so vividly because you've been hypnotized into the mind of the narrator that like, and I think the play does so much by just being like it doesn't have to tell you a whole, it can just be the play, but you're seeing it. I would like I saw it how I figure it actually went down without having to be, told how it went down by just reading the play.
Yeah, and it's so much of it, like a lot of stuff in the Book of the New Sun, is you work it out by implication. And this is all implication, like, because it's just like, this is a random play that I'm throwing in. So you've got to like reconstruct it from what you know about like how they perform the play for people, what the actual kind of con of the play actually is as well. It's pretty funny to read it like this very kind of epic dramatic play, but like, they're using it to extort people for money and shit like that. So yeah. What are your problems with the play, David?
Okay, so before I get into my problems, it is Gene Wolfe, so it has some very beautiful language. Deep bells toll off stage. That's the stage direction. The autarch says, what's that? You, prophet, go and see who's ordered that clamor and why. Exit prophet. And then Nod says, I feel sure your bells have begun the welcome of the new sun. It is what I came to do myself. It is our custom, when an honored guest arrives, to roar and beat our chests and pound the ground and the trunks of trees all about with gladness, and lift the greatest rocks we can, and send them down the gorges in honor of him. I will do that this morning if you will set me free, and I feel sure Earth herself will join me. The very mountains will leap into the sea when the new sun rises up today. Banger! That shit is so fucking good. So I read that just to, I don't have a problem with any of the writing in this play in particular. The issue that I have with it is that it is a bit expository, right? It is a bit like, in a world where the earth is very old and we're going to go back to Adam and Eve, but then it's not Adam and Eve. And then I didn't hate it. I do think that, so if you're wondering if this comes back in the Book of the New Sun, no. But there's a fifth book called The Earth of the New Sun, which is this play in book form, basically, right? So that's like the Earth of the New Sun is like the Silmarillion of this whole thing. But the problem that I have with it mainly is it's I don't love its position in the book, right? It's about, where is it at? It's towards the end. It's towards the end. It's kind of like the opener of the final third of the book.
It's like 5/6 of the way in.
Oh, so
I say that because
it's like in the middle of the third. And I think that where it's placed as a reader, I think that what's the chap? Is Jolenta what comes first? Yeah, Jolenta comes before that. So we're kind of vibing on that, and then we go directly into the play. So I have a problem with its position, and I think overall, I just think that this is one area, just one, in the whole Book of the New Sun where Wolfe, though it is obtuse and abstract, I think that he goes a bit too much into the lore, right? And I kind of don't want to know, right? So to me, what's very uninteresting is like what set things in motion and what's coming and prophecy, and this was all foretold. I get why it's there. I don't know how I would have done it differently. I would not presume to offer how I would have done it differently, even if I did. But I think that I think the play for me would have worked a lot better if we just saw the bit with the Inquisitor and the Familiar, right? With Severian. I think it gets bogged down in the Jahi and Meshian and Meshia and Gabriel, and it just stops being fun for me in the first half of the play.
What if it does have a weird position from what I can tell in the entire story, because like it would seem to make more sense, perhaps too much sense, if you're going to do the play to put it in the first volume, like when we first find out that that's what they're doing. But I don't know, like how would you feel about that if it was moved to the first volume? Counter history here.
If it was moved to the first volume, I actually think it would be worse there.
Really?
Because I think that in Shadow, I think he does it perfectly. I don't. My contention is that we don't need this at all throughout the whole book. Like we just don't need it.
But do you only know that because you've already read it all? Because like from when I was reading it, I was finding it fun and also like, oh, this is going to pay off in the end, because it usually does with Gene Wolfe. Do you think
I could see that? That's a really good point.
Is he mystery boxing here?
Well, here's what I'll say. I'll say that it's not terrible. It's better than most other writers on their best day, right? I don't presume to tell Gene Wolfe, rest in peace, what he should have done here. What I will say is that it's a low point for me because it is the kind of thing in the Book of the New Sun that I don't care about. right? It is mysterious, but it's a little bit too lore-y for me, is all I'll say. Like, I just don't really care. Although, the line about, I feel the bells are tolling for the new sun. I mean, like, that's metal as fuck. So we got that out of it, at least.
I do feel like it's doing a lot for the character of Talos too. And again, in a way that is like, you're coming along for the ride with these characters. I'm not just going to tell you how they got to this revelation or whatever. And since Talos wrote the play, it is more like, you know, Uncle Gene commits to the bit and is like, Severian's not writing this part. David's not going to like it as much because it's a different writer.
But isn't it Severian's
like,
reconstruction of the play though? Like,
it is. Yeah. It's that's a super good point. Yeah. I mean, and we don't know if that is him or not. And I do think that in the same way the story works, like, this works as, you know, the scene that follows right after it makes it all worth it for me. Cause like, that's the punchline to me.
It's such a great,
Baldander's, he loses his shit. He gets too into the role. You know, and he starts fucking up the aliens, the Kakajins in the audience or whatever. So to me, it's all worth it. And as a expanse of time, again, like, you know, we're given this feeling of being with them through all that, because I kind of feel like, Matt, I like what you said about like trying to figure out which characters were doing that, but it does serve an interesting purpose of like, this is kind of how Wolfe is doing character development with these characters, right? Because as you're like, Jahi is like Jolenta, obviously, right? Naked chick, hot, whatever. Baldander's is clearly Nod, and Severian's obviously the familiar. But like, who are the demons, and who are the soldiers, and, you know, who's Gabriel, who's the autarch, right? Like, I'm assuming Talos is the autarch in this, right? But he does pull an interesting magic trick with it, where like, you're getting character development through them by imagining them playing roles. So actually, I've revised my opinion. It's actually good.
And then you get this, like, it's so worth it just for the punch. Like, the payoff is so good. So like, in a nutshell, like we said, it's like this play, and it's kind of a con the way that they put it on. And, you know, Baldander is getting too into the role, but then we also find out that like, there's the cockamammies, the dudes I never the aliens,
the hooplas, the hullabaloos.
But so, you know, and they're probably, I got this, like, they're kind of influencing his rage, right? Like, it's not just he's getting too into the role. It's, don't the alien dudes have something to do with why Baldander is kind of flipping out?
I thought it was because that's actually, I took it as Baldander's being like a descendant of Nod, basically. Right, like he's tapping into some like blood lineage there, because like he's a Nephilim basically, right? Like he's from the race of giants. Like, they say at a certain point that he hasn't grown as much as he's going to grow, and Severian says, but his hair is gray, and they're like, wait, he's wait. He's young. That fool's gonna get big. So I took it as like this kind of like a ancestral blood rage that came out in him.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But so I just want to read that, because it like, it was just so exciting to get to this point. And you'd have to read the whole play to like really feel the impact of it, which is why I'm glad it's in here, because you get through this whole play and then you're like, this is crazy. Like, but so the giant was feigning madness as his role required. His coarse hair hung about his eyes, and they, behind its screen, blazed so wildly I could see them despite it. His mouth hung slack, drooling spittle and showing his yellow teeth. Arms twice the length of my own groped toward me. What frightened me, and I was frightened, I admit, and wished heartily I had Terminus Est in my hands instead of the iron flambeau, was what I can only call the expression beneath the lack of expression on his face. It was there like the black water we sometimes glimpse moving beneath the ice when the river freezes. Bald Anders had found a terrible joy now in being as he was. And when I faced him, I realized for the first time that he was not so much feigning madness on the stage as feigning sanity and his dim humility off it. I wondered then how much he had influenced the writing of the play, though it may be only that Dr. Talos had, as he surely had, understood his patient better than I. So I think you're 100% right with that. Yeah, because Talos is like, I know this fool. Like,
well, there's an interesting line too where they flip it, right? Where you think Bald Anders is Talos's servant or whatever, and then it gets flipped, and it's like, no, he's Bald Anders' servant. Like he serves him, not the other way around. So like he's kind of stewarding Bald Anders into whatever he's supposed to become.
Which did you read it, or is that in another book?
No. I'll be right
No
back.
comment.
Y'all continue. I'll be right back.
No comment. The other thing, actually, when Kelby was mentioning how he was frightened, I'm just trying to find it. There's a really great passage, which, like, there's so many pearls of wisdom in this book. Not just this volume, but this entire book. But like the point about, I've got to find it because it's such a perfect passage. The point about like courage and cowardice was like, do you remember that? It was like so real.
It's
like
he was taught. It's the rape part, right? Where he's talking about his mentor who couldn't bring himself to rape the client.
Yeah. For some reason,
I love that they call them clients too. That's so creepy.
For some reason, I thought it was in the, or was that bit must have been a digression while he was in the cave because, because he was talking about how like scared he was, but it was like the difference between being scared in anticipation of something and scared after the something happened, like the implications of that. Like it's just so perfectly rendered that it's just like, fuck, that is so real. And like, and the different sorts of men who go about, and women too, I guess, who go about their lives like being scared of something that might happen versus people who are fearful of. Like,
right. That was in the cave. Yeah, that was in the cave because he's talking about how he essentially like he didn't know how much danger he was actually in.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Like he learned about it later. He's like, oh yeah, I was like this close to dying, but at the moment I didn't notice it. Let's try to find it. Why not?
That's something that I really like associated with because I remember like I got into so much. I was such a little shit when I was younger. And there are so many things that I look back on now that are just like really, I was really a kind of possibly in danger there and I didn't even know. So this is how dumb I was. Like me and my friends, can't believe I'm admitting this publicly, but me and my friends did this really like stupid teenage boy, ridiculous like thing where we went around, we just got our licenses. So we were driving around the neighborhood and we were like, being such fucking hoodlums, just with cricket bats, smashing people's letterboxes.
Yeah, let's go.
And so we were just doing that, and then like this is on like some Saturday night where we were like drinking whatever bourbon and fucking whiskey and shit like that, and we did that. And then we came back home to my friend's place, and he didn't have his parents weren't home or whatever, and then like these guys rocked up, like just these random guys, and we're like just kind of were there like while we were out back around a fire and stuff, and like sort of like menacing us in a way that like I recognize now, but we didn't recognize then. It was just like, oh, and then these random guys showed up. It's like, no, they were clearly like worked out that we were the little shits who were going around like probably damaged their letterbox, and they had just turned up. They didn't mention anything about it, but like they were clearly like trying to suss it out, like if we were the ones, you know, like, and if they'd found out, they probably would have like beat the shit out of us. Like that's something that I was like, I completely didn't clock when I was like fucking 16 or whatever. And then I look back on that and was like, you were in so much danger.
Dude, there was a time I was at a bar with a friend and we were having beers, and he had 5-MeO DMT back at his house. He's like, hey, you want to go smoke some toad? Right. And I was like, absolutely, I do. So we drove back to his house. Right. And I get to his house, his dog runs out, I'm petting his dog, and that's the last thing I remember. So while I was in the bar, I got roofied, right? Because this bar, Chung's, was like notorious for people roofing. Just like if you leave your beer out, they're just going through and dipping each one. And so the way my memory works with that is that I remember petting his dog, then nothing. Then flashes of consciousness as I'm driving, because apparently at some point in the night, I his mom was watching me, and I just said I had to leave. I had to go back to my mother's house, and I drove around like his house and my mother's house were maybe 3 miles apart, and I drove for 4 hours, and it's just not there. It's gone. Right. So when I think back on that, I'm like, that could have gone so wrong in so many ways. And what's really funny as a coda to that story. So I got the job at the high school that I work at. Right. And my friend's mother is the nurse at that high school. And so she sees me and she says, oh my God, David, I haven't seen you in forever. It's so good to see you. She's like, and then she starts giggling. She's like, the last time I saw you, you were roofied. I was like, yeah. Keep that shit to yourself. Tell nobody about the time that I was roofied. But in a similar way to your story, I feel like I know Kelby has a ton of these too, but like, yeah, you think back on youth and you're like, oh, I was just like either too dumb or too fucked up to know how close I could have come. My wife, her sister, was at the same bar, got roofied in the same way, but got pulled over, fought the cops, and woke up. I woke up in a bed in my mother's room with my stepfather performing an exorcism on me. She woke up in jail, right? Because the cops actually stopped her. And it's this whole thing of like, if you're at a bar and you're having a beer as an adult, right? You get pilled, right? Go black. And then you come back to and you're in jail. Like, is that your fault? Is that really your fault? Not really, right? I mean, like, it's not your fault. But yeah, there are so many. And I think that like a lot of the neuroses that I suffered from as in my late 20s, I'm over them now, but it was all based on that. It was like based on like sitting down and ruminating over like how dead I could be, how fucked up I could be. And yeah, at the time you just don't know. You're just like, yeah, maybe I will just pull my handbrake on the highway just to see what happens. What would happen if I did that? Turns out you spin a bunch and then your car dies. But yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, but he really. Sorry, what was that, Kelby?
That shit is the driving shit is terrifying because I drive a lot, and you kind of have to around here. Like everything's, I guess if you're in the heart of downtown Houston, you could not have a car, but you kind of want to drive around. And when I was doing a lot of speed and shit, I developed narcolepsy to where I just, boom, I'm at work. Boom, I lost my phone and my wallet so many fucking times.
Holy
so
shit.
many times. I remember one time I lost my wallet at a donut place. And then I was so bummed because they called me and were like, hey, we have your wallet. Like, you know, we found, I guess they really cared about returning this wallet because they looked me up and found out how to get a hold of me somehow. I was like, oh, thank God. Yeah. And I went and picked it up. And then I was like, I don't remember getting fucking donuts. Damn, I got donuts. I don't even remember it. But so many times waking up on the road where you're just like, oh shit. Like,
holy fuck. It's a miracle. Like, you ever look at that stuff like that and be like, it's a miracle I'm alive.
oh yeah. It's insane. Like there's something keeping me here because I should have been dead probably 17 fucking times by now.
Yeah, it's funny though, like where you think about like blackouts and stuff like that. Sometimes when I'm driving, like I'll just, because it's so automatic sometimes if you drive a lot, because I do now. I don't do public transport anymore. I live in a pretty big city, but I just don't do it anymore because I got sick of it when like they were doing all the masks and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm not wearing a mask to catch a fucking tram. Like so it's just like I was driving everywhere, and now it's so automatic that I like when you forget the drive, you know what I mean? Like, because you probably drive a lot too. You're just like, oh, I did all of that stuff. Like, and driving is a very when you think about it, it's a very complex, you know, behavior. And you just forgot all that. I just like, that's completely lost. I don't have any memory of like getting down the street. Like, it just doesn't register. And then that might be dementia. I don't know.
No, but like it's even worse when I've been door dashing lately.
Yeah.
And you're so like you're into the act because you want to accept the order and get it as fast as possible and move on to the next thing. And you're just following GPS wherever it's taking you. And then you're like, cool, on to the next one. Like 5 orders in, I'll be like, I did deliver. I'll check the seat and make sure the food's not just sitting there. I'm like, I did deliver shit, right? Like I didn't like, I'll just kind of come to and go, where am I?
I have
what's happening?
I have that in the shower. It's like, wait, did I wash my hair? Literally almost every time I get in the shower, I'm like, wait, did I wash my hair? No, I did.
I got one goal when I get in the shower.
What's that?
To bust.
Well, it's not washing my hair. Yeah.
Married life.
Yeah.
All right.
Like, oh, don't bust on the children's toys that are all over the bathtub.
just don't tell them.
It's harmless.
The next day he's got like a zebra, and I see the zebra. I'm like, oh shit, okay.
Don't put that in your mouth.
I rinsed it. It should be good.
It's literally fine. He's literally made from that. So, you know, he'll be
true. Yeah, true. Yeah.
All right. So any other thing? One thing I wanted to talk about was, I think we kind of mentioned it, but like the fight scenes are really cool in this, like in a way that I didn't expect, because like the first one was very like contemplative, and like there wasn't much of that, like just very almost James Cameron-esque, like where, you know, everything is very kind of logical and makes sense. You always know where you are when he's like describing what's happening. But yeah, probably very unsophisticated of me to say so, but like the fight scenes were cool. You know, so
they were.
Yeah.
There was more description of movement than just like you were saying with Shadow of the Torture, how it's like just more of the practicality of it. It's more like about the how than the what in this one. More skulls cracking, more blood spraying, more like, I was especially with the it starts off with the stage, the torturing, and then there's the man apes. So it kicks off the book with this kind of newer direction of the way the violence is depicted. You're going like, all right, let's go. Like, yeah, this is feeding my primal just lust for gore.
Your man ape lust for gore.
Yes, this is feeding my man ape lust.
Yeah. Was there anything else we wanted to mention?
I think we covered it.
We covered a lot. I mean, obviously you can never cover everything in Uncle Gene's work because there's so much there. Like there are whole podcasts that basically do multiple episodes on one chapter. So
well, one chapter, yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out
there's
to Soup.
Oh yeah. There's there's kind of a bit more humor in this one too. I did think the like at the end, I actually laughed out loud, just his interaction with the old man and the ox. When he's like, is that an ox? He's like, look, I was just using, is this your ox? And he's like, no, I was asking because my eyes aren't so good anymore.
Yeah. I love that guy. Was it that guy? Yeah, it was that guy. And it was the other dude who showed up around the time of the witches. What's his name?
Hildegard.
Yeah.
Has a sort of like patois. Like he sounds like he's from the South or something.
I've seen it. I've seen that. Yeah. It's like, okay, cool. No, I fucked with it though. Like he had a tall hat. I'm like, okay, cool. So he had like a 10-gallon, like he's a cowboy basically,
or a gaucho,
right,
since
cool.
he'd be in South America. So
yeah, true. And they have brown skin, so he's that's a good point. Yeah, he is a gaucho. He's a vaquero.
I also wanted to mention as well, I always find it funny when I do like the background research to like what other people have said and stuff. And I found there's like a recap series on Tor.com, the publisher.
Yeah, right.
And like this guy, this is so 2019. Like basically all of these recaps are just like what's problematic about
Oh, isn't it funny? It's really funny how like that kind of thing is already kind of cute in a way. It's like quaint. It's like, oh, are you doing a problematic recap? It's the women, right? It's like how like if if he's fighting somebody and they're weak, it's like, yeah, he was as strong as a woman. Yeah. Ursula Le Guin loves him though, and if Grandmother Ursula likes Gene, then
exactly.
Ursula Le Guin said, "This is a masterpiece, totally original, new, incomparable. So your criticisms are invalid."
Yeah, the one thing that I found about, like, I think this was in the part one of the recap of Claw of the Conciliator. This person was like, and this wasn't a woman, by the way, like it was a guy.
Of course not. No, it's a fag.
Yeah. Yes, exactly a fact. He was like, because he'd read it before as well. So he was like, I seem to remember the war was mentioned briefly, this being the war against the Askians, who won't appear in the series until book 3 or 4. The only thing I remember was that the portrayal of the Askians seemed problematic somehow. But I can't tell why because I haven't reached this part yet. So that's the only part you remember. like what you remember from this wonderful book is that the war with the Askians was like problematic somehow. That's what you took away.
You don't know how.
Yeah.
You can't say how, right? It's like, oh, it's just vaguely wrong.
That's what you took away from this towering work of masterful genius, is that in some way the war with the Askians was problematic.
Do you think that people think that way, or do you think it's all fake? I think it's all fake.
I think it's all fake too. And also, I don't think thinking that way has any currency anymore, or like the currency is rapidly diminishing. So I think most people, this is going to take a while in like a lot of creative industries, but I think most people in general, just whenever people start shit like this, just roll their eyes. They're over it. Like they're done. Like this, it was like a fad of the long 2010s, I guess we would say, which is only just coming to an end now.
Yeah, I think that I think the same thing. Like, I think that nobody really gives that. Well, because it did what it was always going to do, which was that it flew too close to the sun. You know, if you want to point out problematic things in some work, we can all be like, oh yeah, that's pretty fucked up. Right. And then you go a little bit deeper and then you say things like, but what about like, I don't know, Dances with Wolves, right? Like there's problems with that. It's like, okay, sure. Yeah.
Roald Dahl.
Like, yeah. But what about Roald Dahl? He says, and then people are like, I mean, all that's in there because like he's making a point about, no, we're going to, I really do actually think, I'm glad Kelby brought that up because I do think that the virality of them changing Roald Dahl's language, I think that might have been a breaking point for a lot of people where they're like, what? Like James and the Giant Peach and, the Twits and the Witches and like these were important. And the BFG, like these were all like super important.
Well, and it feels more like you have a brainwashing agenda whenever you attack children's literature versus like taking I almost just said it, taking the N-word out of Huckleberry Finn.
Which they were doing when I was in high school. That's old.
And
like
what's really
copies of Huck Finn had the N-word like blacked out.
What's really cool is whenever I was so I had friends in community college who I would go like to art shit with, like I'd go watch their play of Rocky Horror Picture Show or like go see their art gallery or whatever. And there was this thing on censorship that one of the students was doing, and one of his pieces was like the opposite of that. It was like Huck Finn was the center of his wall of different pages torn out of like classic literature and shit, and he had added the N-word to others instead of like he highlighted it in Huck Finn and then he wrote in the N-word in other pieces that didn't have it and put it all over the wall. I was like, this is awesome.
That's cool. I like that. I do think the tide is turning, but also the problem with it is like, I'm kind of optimistic about it, but also a lot of people in positions of power have been put there under this like regime. And so like, I think like it's going to hang around for a while yet. Like, cause this kind of person who was like complaining about some like fictional war that like wonderful Gene Wolfe wrote about is like, they're all the people who work in publishing and like all different sorts of institutions now. And it's like, there may be some people who hate that these people are there, but it's like, you put them there. You allowed them to like take up these spaces. And that's your bed and you have to lay in it, like, because you made it.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, and it's going to get to the point where it's so bad that, they'll have to be fired or replaced, as these kind of people do, but it is very deep. Like the hooks are in deep. There was a recent controversy about fantastic fiction, some magazine. I forget which one.
Was it FNSF?
Yeah, fantasy and science fiction. Yeah. Simmons posted it in the chat, and it was like, they had platformed a Nazi, some white dude but the editor who platformed this guy was a black woman. And so like I've told people this before, I'm like, this is where like the actual pain points are going to come from. It's when a black person does these things that you're not supposed to do. And then these white liberals get like, wow, sweating.
I'm supposed to think about this.
Two red buttons. They're like, oh, which one are we racist? Do we hate Nazis or love black people? Which one do we go with? So it's just not sustainable, basically. And it's already, the tide is already turning. And ultimately, this is America, and money matters. So as soon as, we had Alex Kazemi on our podcast, I think his book's going to pop. Once these books start selling, all these woke people, it's a business, baby. You got to make money. So they're going to be like, we'll walk this back. It's not going to be like a formal apology thing where they say we were wrong for 10 years of, marginalizing entire groups of people because, we had our own little red scare, sorry about that. They're not going to do that. They're just nobody's going to talk about it. They'll just walk it back and we'll go back to normal. Yeah.
They've already done that with the pandemic stuff. So many people that were the most fucking hardcore, posting people out their neighbors partying and stuff like that act now that was a little bit over the top, wasn't it? But not referring to their own behavior.
It's a joke.
Right, they kind of down, they just don't address the fact that they did specific things that contributed to that general. Yeah.
What I've noticed is that what their line now with the COVID shit is well, we didn't know. We didn't know. It was a pandemic. It was the fog of war. We didn't know. And you didn't know either. And I'm like, bitch, yes, I did. I was reading.
Yes. You were counseling the people who were saying this stuff, to get them fired or removed from social media and shit like that.
I was reading scientific papers about what this actually was. So I was never worried, and I was not wearing masks, and I didn't take the shot, and I'm good. I'm good. But you couldn't have known. You were just doing that to be a contrarian. Okay. Yeah.
But
sure,
people are even that way with the other stuff that we're talking about, the social justice stuff. It's you were the biggest, I know several people who were the biggest cheerleaders of all of this shit. And they're like you say, they're walking it back. They're oh, it's a bit crazy, isn't it? And I remember 2 years ago, you were this crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. That was you. Yeah. It's really hard to be normal in this world. To just be normal and to be able to say I'm the same person who I was in a lot of respects in 2012, right? I was, that was just me, and you were all okay with me then. And I'm that guy now, but it's different, right? We've been through this whole thing where I watched all of you just change. Just get really strange about everything. It's about race and gender and sexuality. Yeah. It's weird.
Crazy how much people will change just to get. It's like the rat with the cheese thing, and a lot of us simply have actual principles.
Principles.
Cringy.
Simple. Simple.
There's people who are like, "Oh, cheese. You just want me to stab my best friend in the cool? Yeah, give it to me."
Yeah. Oh, dude, people don't have principles, and that is if you have to find religion to find principles, then please become religious. I'm for it. Just do that, because a lot of people, when they don't have God or something else, just becomes the God, and that God looks like Rachel Maddow. That's not who you want to be your God.
Yeah, that's
an angry God.
Yeah, that's the old G.K. Chesterton quote. If you don't believe in God, you believe in anything. So and anything is
Good
Rachel Maddow
GK.
apparently.
Big old fat smart fuck.
He was a big fat smart fuck, much like Gene Wolfe.
Yeah, Gene Wolfe was not a looker, Uncle Gene.
Yeah.
But a genius. So he gets a pass.
A gene, yes.
A genius.
Genius. I'm trying to be a genius like that too. Like you read a book like the Book of the New Sun, or I've been reading Tim Powers a lot lately.
He's so good.
These guys who've just, dude, you see these guys who've just done these amazing things, and you're like, it revitalized me because I was like, oh, that's what I want to do, right? Like all this dumb shit with the social justice, or like the little cliquey indie writers circles. Like it doesn't matter because I got my eye on the fucking prize. Like I'm trying to do that, and everything else is just noise now.
Isn't it so weird that so many people just don't do that? Like when you kind of have your eye on the prize and that's what you want to do, and so many people like complicate it with all of this bullshit, like this kind of striver kind of like grabby sort of like
it's like who gives a shit? Like I'm trying to write something like this. I want like 50 years after my death, I want people to be like, damn, that book was fucking hard. That guy did it, and I don't know when that book's going to come, but it will. But until then, it's like, but having that in mind, like having these idols like Gene Wolfe and Ursula Le Guin, and I love Octavia Butler too. Like I think they're all super great. Have you read The Parable of the Sower?
Yeah, amazing.
Oh, it's so good, so good. And Kindred and all that kind of stuff. Like all these people who like mixed lit and sci-fi together. Like those are the three I think of. I think of Wolfe, Butler, and Le Guin. And it's like, I want to do that. And then everything else just kind of like falls away. You're like, I don't like, what are we talking about this week? Who cares?
So many people are focused on the everything else, it's like, how about you fucking write something?
Just right. Do you know what Octavia Butler thinks about fucking Donald Trump being arrested? No, bitch.
Who cares?
No. Wait, is she dead? I don't think. No, Octavia Butler's not dead.
No, she is dead.
Is she dead?
Yeah,
she is dead. Oh, rest in peace. Anyway, so you wouldn't know what she's.
Rest in power, David.
Point is, my point is, so she never finished the trilogy. Then that sucks. Wait, I'm gonna look this up. I gotta fact check you right now.
I'm certain she's dead. I'm gonna look it up too. Well,
I'm hearing this for the first time.
I mean, I think we finished.
This is my Donald Trump. Like I'm hearing this for the first time. Octavia Butler. Yo, Octavia Butler died fucking like 15 years ago.
Damn.
When was that? That was probably in your like younger days when you were like really fucked up. Maybe you didn't notice it.
I had no idea. Like she died as soon as I got out of high school. Yo, she's been dead forever.
You were writing.
I'm so fucking retarded. Oh, well, anyway, rest in power. Octavia Butler. Gene Wolfe is dead also. And Ursula's dead too. So yeah.
All the greats.
That's like greats. I kind of feel like I am working on my thing right now. Hopefully something else comes along down the line that's like, actually this is the big, but I kind of feel like I'm working on my magnum opus right now. And it kind of scares it scares me because I'm like, shit, am I gonna like die next year or something? Like what the fuck? Because like life is like a narrative, and it's like that seems like something you would climax on, but I guess I'll just write the best thing ever and then I'll just kind of piss off the rest of my life.
All right. Do we have anything more to say about Uncle Gene's second volume, gentlemen?
It's a pulpy, riotous, laugh out loud, horny. It's everything you want in a book. It really is. It really truly is. I'm hyped to do this a third and fourth time.
yeah, if you want to know what books can do that other mediums can't, this is a perfect example. So go read that shit.
Yeah. I co-sign both of those comments, and thank you again for joining me, boys. If people want to find you, where can they find you? You don't want people to find you.
Not my address is Broken River Books. Yeah, Agitator. Just search Agitator on fucking any podcatcher thing. Patreon.com/Agitator. BrokenRiverBooks.com. That'll cover all the bases.
And I will see you again for the third part, which will be Sword of the Lictor. Exciting.
Let's go.
Thanks so much for joining me again, boys.
Thanks, bro. This was a blast.
Thank you.
Bye. There we go.